Welcome everybody. I'm really happy to introduce you all to our panel discussion this evening, at least evening here in Germany where I'm sitting right now. And before I talk too much, I will just introduce to you all of our speakers for the evening. This is John Shegerian. For the first, he is from ERI. We had a webinar from him on Monday. ERI is the Electronics Recycler International, and yeah, they are dealing with electronics. John is the chairman and sitting in the US right now. Hi, John. Nice to have you.
An honor to be here today. Thank you very much, Felix.
Thank you so much. Then next we have Mark Abbas. He is the CMO of the AMCS Group, sitting in the Netherlands right now, and they are a software company providing different softwares, especially for the waste management technologies. Mark, nice to have you. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me, Felix.
Perfect. And then next we've got Edward Kosior. He is sitting in Australia right now, taking the time at night for us. Thank you for that already. He is managing director of Nextek Ltd. They are a plastic recycling company from the UK. Hi, Edward.
Hi, Felix, and thank you for inviting me onto the panel.
Thank you. Then next, I've got Nick Cliffe with us. He is from Innovate UK. So they are the innovation institute for the United Kingdom, and he is head of advanced materials. I'm very happy to hear what you've got to tell us all about that.
Hi, good afternoon, Felix. Good afternoon, everyone.
Yeah, he's sitting in the UK, so a nice evening for him right now as well. In the same country, we've got Tim Rotheray. He is from Viridor, who are a full view recycling and waste management company from the UK. He is director of innovation. Tim, so good to have you.
Sorry, I'm on mute. Thank you very much for having me.
Perfect, thank you. All right, so this evening we will talk a little bit about the whole innovations in recycling that will come up in the next 1, 2, 10, 20, and maybe even 100 years, if we can have a look in the glass bowl, how you say, here in Germany. Thank you. And yeah, the first question I've got, from the different views you've got all onto the recycling company, what do you think will be the most important technology for the next 20 years that is coming up for us? So we've got a lot of things. We've got AI, we've got big data, Internet of Things, all the digitalization, Industry 4.0 and everything that's coming there. Maybe, Mark, do you want to start up? What would you say in a few words will be most important to us?
Yeah, Felix. Well, first of all, let's be honest. We worked with many waste and recycling companies in the past, and they haven't been really known for embracing new technologies in the last couple of years. So it's been a kind of a slow industry in the first place. So it's a bit harder maybe to predict how this industry will embrace these kind of new technologies. And from my perspective, so we worked more or less on the back office processes and all of that, and waste and recyclers. For me, what I think is really exciting is using those advanced technologies for material grading. I think that's really important. There's so many businesses out there, if you ask me, who don't really understand their margins properly, who don't have a great view of the composition of the stuff that they take on and they recycle. So I really am a strong believer in technologies that are advancing in that direction. So AI, machine learning, so learning how to recognize composition so we can properly price the goods throughout the life cycle of these products.
Thank you, totally. Maybe we can go on, Edward. What would you say about that as a specialized recycler in the plastics business? I think that is pretty important to you as well, or how would you?
Look, absolutely. And if I just clarify that what Nextek does is we develop technology and we design recycling factories. And what Mark says is actually really right about the material grading and calculating the value as you go. But I think the thing that we will see over the next 10 years is a big shift in the brand owners and the retailers who make and use packaging in their products. And I think what we'll see is they will make their packaging recyclable. Right now, so much packaging is made for a single use. Even though they say it's recyclable, it's still been designed for a single use. Now, in the future, I think what we'll do is we'll see brand owners truly making their packaging recyclable, taking the recycled material and putting it back into the loop again. Now, right now, that whole loop is missing. And it's missing because we haven't started to design a circular system as yet. Everyone's on the edge, everyone's made their commitments, and the next 10 years, we need to see the progress. I think that will make recycling really work and the circular economy really work.
Thank you, totally. So you've talked about the business side of it. Maybe, Tim, you can talk a little bit about the consumer side of it as well, as of course your company is also the one which is picking up the waste from the consumer, has that type of contact. Do you think that will be enough to develop it on the business side, or what will have to be done to really reach that circular economy we are all looking for?
So I think that if you think of the consumer very rarely actually wants the material, the packaging. They want what's inside it. And if you think about particularly fast-moving consumer goods, which is where a lot of packaging material is, it is all about making the consumer's life easier. Easy to open packets. Everything is about making your life quicker and simpler and easier because life is more complicated. And it is our job as both the recyclers and the reprocessors, but also working in partnership with the manufacturers to make those consumers' life as easy as possible. You want to get to the position where the consumer finds that the easiest thing for them to do is to put the material in the right place in terms of recyclability and giving us and ensuring that there's a purity of material that comes through, because the more contaminated material is, the more expensive it is to process. And I think that therefore what Mark mentioned in terms of understanding much better what is coming through the assets, so the recycling facilities and then the reprocessing facilities, and understanding those grades will be key. And I think that we'll start to see that get greater pressure, and at the same time the brands increasingly standardizing the kinds of materials that come through, so that we will see a smaller number of packaging types, and therefore it will be easier to separate, because all of this is going to be, from their perspective, about driving down cost. So if we make it simpler, you make it simpler for the consumer, but you also make it simpler for the brand. So I think we'll start to see a reduction in the plethora of different types of packaging material, and we'll start to see a simplification in that in order to increase recyclability.
Mm-hmm. Totally. Thank you for that perspective. I think both will be very needed. Before we come back to John, who's addressing some different products, Nick, maybe as far as I believe, you have maybe a grander view on all that from maybe a little bit of an outside perspective without being a business in that. What is your opinion on that?
So I see innovation happening everywhere across the waste and recycling industry. And if we were to particularly look at the sorts of projects and technologies and companies that we're engaging with at the moment in the UK, and I dare say throughout the world, I think the increasing digitization and the adoption of digital, big data, AI, all the sort of the headline topics is really starting to make its presence felt within this sector, particularly at the R&D and innovation phase. Some of the things that I think we're going to see, I think to build on some of the things that Mark was referring to, much greater use of tracking data, quality measurement, how we manage that data, Another area that I think there's a lot of interest, particularly in the design and development of the next generation of recycling plants, will be things like digital twinning, actually wholly integrating digital models of recycling processes, which are getting increasingly complex, allowing the process and the procedures and the functionality and ultimately the profitability of these businesses to be optimized.
So if we've got, of course, you say complexity, and while you say that, I'm immediately thinking about John, who I think has to handle with a lot of the more complex devices and recycling with electronics, which especially getting back the valuables in there is pretty hard. But maybe John, what is in your opinion, the next big thing for recycling?
Well, as all of my colleagues here have shared, they've touched on artificial intelligence, big data, and Internet of Things. So let me just give you the holistic approach to those three topics. When we got in this business in 2002, e-waste was the fastest growing solid waste stream in the world. In 2020, it still is the fastest growing solid waste stream in the world, and there's no end in sight. Why? One of the reasons is Internet of Things. There was no iPhone, iPad, nor was there any Alexa, wearables, Ring, or Nest when we got into this business. Now, with the Internet of Things, there's a plethora and a growing amount of new electronic products that need to be recycled responsibly. So there's no end in sight for young entrepreneurs that are listening today that want to get into this industry. This is a great time. It's still the top of the first inning, as we'd say in baseball terminology, in the United States. Secondarily, when it comes to the issue of big data, the way we look at it is data is the new oil of the world. And with GDPR being passed in the EU in May of 2018 and then coming to America, and every state now passing their own version of GDPR, and the federal legislators also looking to pass their own version of GDPR, more regulation around big data that we all are capturing now and privacy is pushing more electronics into the hands of responsible recyclers throughout the EU and also North America, South America, Asia, and the Middle East. So that is also a tremendous and great trend. With regards to artificial intelligence, the innovators and entrepreneurs and companies that are run by innovators and entrepreneurs and disruptors, like our company, ERI, are employing and deploying artificial intelligence and robotics to help with the sophisticated recycling methodologies that need to be done to responsibly recycle all of these new products that are being generated every year. So we were the first to put robots into our facilities and AI, and it's working tremendously. And those that are willing to adopt and adapt and be flexible will continue to thrive as e-waste continues to grow around the whole planet.
Thank you so much for that view on the different trends, especially in e-waste. You talked about it a little bit before and said that, yeah, it's especially the growing amount of big data and privacy rules. Maybe a little bit off topic, but let me bounce that over to Mark. And do you have any experience? How are the privacy rights if I'm looking at my data based on my waste? Are there consumer concerns on that, especially when we go at even more diversifying the different waste types, having a look at which household is giving up? Are there any concerns, or does that affect you, Mark?
Well, I remember when GDPR got launched in Europe, there was definitely a lot of concerns and there was a lot of fuss about it. And companies like ours, we're hosting companies' data. We're running cloud platforms with data, so we have to comply to the strict rules. We had to go through real thorough processes. We've got data protecting officers and everything in place. So we took a lot of measures, and our customers did the same. So I think after a short wave of concerns there, that there obviously were, like, what the hell are you going to do with my data? Like, you know exactly what I consume, what I dispose, what I, and all of that stuff. And what are you going to do with the data? So I've seen a few cases in the Netherlands, for instance, but I must say that it's gone a bit more to the background now. But what we see, it varies country by country, right? So I was in front of probably about 140 German customers after we acquired a business in Germany. And I was talking about our platform, and I was talking about, we have a cloud platform, and I didn't know I was talking about that passionately. And they were like, the cloud, but no way. We don't want the cloud. That's not secure. That's not safe. We want on-premise. And so I realized that even in Europe, it's not a common market. There's great big differences. So you have to be mindful of that as well. So my thing is, you have to build very robust systems that are 100% secure. You have to get your certificates. That's why we as a company, we partner with Microsoft. We have a global partnership. We leverage their Azure platform, and we get all those capabilities of security and compliance certificates and all of that. We don't really have to worry about that. So we kind of have that insured by Microsoft, so they constantly invest, because for smaller, well, we're relatively small. We got 600 people across the globe, but it's difficult for us to invest in all these technologies to protect that data. So it's great to partner with the big guys who are at the moment.
Thank you. So I think that will be something we will have to deal with, especially looking at big data, looking at AI, growing forward. Thank you for that. And yeah, you've talked about it a little bit. In Germany, we've had a little bit of problems with that. Do you think in Europe we will, or in the world, we will have, how do you say it in English best, which will hurt digitalization the most? We've got a rapid increase in digitalization through coronavirus right now, but if you look only a year back, many of the industries, and especially recycling, were a little behind. Maybe Nick, do you have an overview of that? How's that developing, or what will be hardest about that in the next years?
Sure. Certainly, speaking as someone who works in an innovation agency and is constantly surrounded by digital-based innovation, it's a sort of endless frustration. Why aren't these technologies, why aren't these systems immediately taken up and integrated when the benefits seem so self-evident? But of course, one of the reasons that they seem self-evident is that I work in a big agency full of people absolutely chock full of exactly the knowledge and skills that allows people to understand the benefits that these technologies bring. Certainly as well, we're not, as an innovation agency, faced with the cost of integrating them and implementing them into your existing business infrastructure facilities. One of the areas that we see a lot of innovation in at the moment is actually around developing retrofit digital solutions. How can we reduce barriers to adoption of digital technologies across all industry, not just waste, materials handling, recycling, and reprocessing? Then again, also, I think as was touched on by Mark and the earlier speakers, there's also a great deal of concern. People and businesses that we talk to worry about having too much data. What can we do with it? What value does it bring? Is it secure? Am I going to get in trouble for holding on to data? And what will my customers think if suddenly they start to suspect that we're paying a little bit too much attention to what they're doing? It's certainly the case in the United Kingdom, and I've probably shared elsewhere around the world, that people are naturally suspicious of doing anything with your bin. Most wheelie bins in the UK have the capability to be chipped, and all sorts of useful information that could ultimately deliver better, leaner, more cost-effective public services could be obtained by enabling that, but there's still paranoia and fear, and it's a real challenge. I can see Tim sort of, I think, possibly itching to come in on that one.
Yeah, I'm sure. Tim, are you the one chipping my waste bin? What are you doing?
Let's just be clear about that. We're not chipping people's waste bins. But your question I thought was quite interesting. It got me thinking when you said, what's the biggest problem? You know, what's the biggest barrier? And ultimately, the biggest barrier is us, companies, industry. It's not the technology exists. And you mentioned coronavirus, and for me, one of the most astonishing things about coronavirus, one of the things I've really learned from it, is it revealed the innate lack of willingness to move by people. So in my organization and many, many others, government certainly, which I deal with a lot, everyone before coronavirus was using teleconferencing. We were all paying for teleconference calls, and we all had video conferencing with much higher quality on our computers already installed, and we were still paying to use teleconferencing. And that entire industry, which should have had a huge boon under coronavirus, totally collapsed. And I'm sure that most companies and most organizations are ditching their telephone conferencing because they've all realized that they can do video conferencing, they can see each other, and it can cope with more than 10 people on a call without having poor quality audio. So the necessity of coronavirus drove us to do something which all of us had available. And it shows how reluctant to move we can be. And so the thing that will limit the uptake of really adventurous, novel, clever approaches to delivering what we've got to do, which is a zero environmental harm circular economy. That's what we've got to deliver. The thing that will limit that progress is us. And we have to be open to be challenged and to consider that there are new ways of doing things. And if we don't recognize that, then we will end up like the telephone conference companies who, when their greatest opportunity arose, realized that they had been doing the wrong thing for too long and all failed.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Tim. Mark, I see you raising your hand.
Yeah.
Please go.
Yeah, sorry, because Tim, that's a very good point. And one other thing I see that's slowing companies down, it is us. It is the companies slowing them down. I see a big struggle there in people modernizing their basic architecture, right? They're holding on to old stuff, and old stuff is not agile enough to adopt all these new technologies. So what you get is a lot of siloed solutions. So when the bin sensors was a big thing a couple of years back, right? Put sensors in the bin, make sure that we predict whenever they're full, we're going to pick them up. And it was very expensive at the time, but it was cool, and it was, it was IoT, and it was big data. And so, but then they realized that it's not just about understanding when you have to pick up the bin. You need to have your waste transfer note handing out. You need to have your weight ticket. You have all that information you need to get together, and you have to prepare a bill, and you have to prepare your reporting for the government. So what you saw in that the early adopters probably for these technologies were probably runner-ups, but they're actually slowing down because their core systems were not talking to each other, and their infrastructure wasn't capable of integrating, and that is slowing them down. So I think companies startups, as you mentioned, that can challenge you now, have a green field, that can start and build from scratch on really agile platforms that can quickly adapt to new situations, because we're not done yet. This innovation will continue to accelerate, right? The innovations is accelerating every year. So I think companies need to be aware that it's not just jumping onto one technology, but thinking about, as a business, do I want to be in this business in 10 years? Then I better invest in a good foundation in terms of technology. That's what I see.
Thank you. May I bounce that over to Edward? How are you seeing that in your company with Nextek? You're ahead of the field, some might say. What are the next steps you will take, and what do you think will be hardest to overcome to get to these steps?
Well, I think Mark and Tim have raised some really important issues about the inertia in industry. And one of the things that we see when you develop a new innovation, you actually need the supply chain to adopt it. So you need the brand owners to adopt it, the people who are then selling the products, and then the recyclers all to be on the same page. Now, that's really hard to do. But the one thing I think the COVID pandemic has taught us is we're all focused on this solution. Everyone is focused on it. So, and we're going to get to a solution, I think, faster than we imagined because of this intense focus. And the same thing goes to recycling. Yes, we've got the tools like the big data and IoT. The fundamental issues of recycling are closer to the ground, because if you're going to recycle, you have to use recycling technology of some sort. You've got to make products from those and sell them into a market. And this is where I think recycling has had a big challenge of complexity. There are lots of things out there that have never been designed to be recycled before, and people will show you something, so here's a package or here's a piece of electronics, and it could be theoretically recyclable, but it actually in practice needs to be simply recyclable. That's how the industry makes its money. And if the business world, like the brand owners, design products that are complex, then they're going to be recycled less. And so to me, the big thing for us is to be good communicators. If we have technology, we actually have to reach out to the supply chain. They then have to look at that closely and adopt it. So communication, good interrelationships between business, they're key ways of getting this out into the field. And the other thing where, you know, if I mentioned the sort of the work that Nick, Cliffe and Innovate UK are doing, they're actually emphasizing that if you're going to go and innovate, you have to commercialize. And I think you've got to get out into the market. And that, I think, is a key thing. So there's some of the things that we're busy trying to be good at. As opposed to being scientists, we've got to do all the other things as well.
True, totally true. It got to be done to work at some point. Yeah, nice. We've been talking a lot about the things, especially how they are in Europe. But maybe I can bounce that over to John to ask him, how is it in the US? You've told us about GDPR coming to the US, and I think in recycling there are some differences as well. How are what is different in the USA, would you say, and how are you going to overcome that?
Well, let's just go back to what my colleagues were just saying, Tim and Edward and even Mark, about how coronavirus has galvanized all of us to look and create better and newer solutions faster. So for instance, one of the key pillars of responsible recycling in any sector, and we're going to use e-waste for our example because that's what we know, is convenience. So one of the things we created for a B2B solution in the United States in 2012 was a box program. 5 different size boxes, from as small as a cell phone size all the way up to a pallet size box, that could be sent via UPS or FedEx to a business to fill up and then return to one of our 8 locations on a reverse logistics basis, using already the transportation system, logistics system that UPS, FedEx, or other great carriers have. That was well adopted by businesses over the last 8 years. We tried to get it to consumers and there was no adoption. To Tim's point, coronavirus all of a sudden took that 8-year technology, which not a lot of people were interested in, and made it the hottest product and service that we have. We've done 10,000 boxes and we have an order for another 30,000 boxes in the last 4 months. So homes all across America, consumers now want a convenient, contactless coronavirus recycling solution for their electronics. And this has galvanized all of us to push the technology where it was going anyway. But as Tim said, it went right now. It's not going to happen in 2025 or 30. It happened now. Zoom would have happened and teleconferencing would have gone, like Tim points out, but who knows when. It happened all now. And so if we can do that in every sector, we can get to circular economy solutions in every sector of recycling faster if we really galvanize our efforts and look for the now instead of the 2030.
Totally right. Thank you. Yeah, we've got to do it now, and it's got to happen. What you got me up to is there gonna be a coronavirus for the circular economy? Will there be anything driving especially recycling that much? Maybe it is some kind of political push or something else. As before coronavirus, of course, everybody was talking about climate change. And as far as I believe, one of the big things to fight climate change and us depleting our Earth will be definitely a circular economy. Are there any things that will push us forward in these sectors so we can innovate at an even greater rate, and not only innovate and of course do the things? Edward, you're raising your hand. Thank you.
Yeah,
please
well,
go on.
My focus for many years has been this recycling of plastics, and plastics has already had its coronavirus, right? So you know, the signal of the longevity of plastics and plastics in oceans and the impact on sea life and animal life is really well documented and really well presented back to the general population, to the stage where plastics are seen as really toxic and bad materials. And so the plastics industry has got to do a lot of work to convince consumers to touch plastics and to use it as a material. And so what's happened is brand owners have been spurred, and either they've gone away from plastics totally. Like if you walk into a McDonald's, there's nothing served to you in plastic. It's all on coated paper. And yet, so the people who do use plastics for important functions like food contact or for personal care products, they're saying we're going to put recycled content back into our packaging. And so they're actually on that journey. So they're on the circular path already, and it's probably less apparent in the packaging sectors like glass and paper, but they've actually been doing it for a long time already. So plastics has had its coronavirus, and it still hasn't found the vaccine yet. Still got a long way to go.
Yeah, totally. I think especially a big problem here for which we need a vaccine is the whole greenwashing effect of it. We've got, you told us about McDonald's as an example. You've got, of course, a lot of paper, but in the end, it all goes into the same waste bin with the food and everything else. So I don't see that really being recycled back to a new cup for my next meal. But yeah, what are your other opinions about that? Anybody got some ideas? What will happen next? Tim, was
yes.
that you were raising?
So an interesting comment. So something that I realised a year or two ago is that greenwashing is an inevitable part of a transformation towards a better economy. It is it is companies trying to do the right thing, probably trying to do it for the minimum cost, and it is actually it is a natural part of the transition to a more sustainable economy. But interestingly, you're asking, will we have a coronavirus moment? The thing that has been incredibly powerful about coronavirus is the speed in which it has been transmitted, and therefore demanded a very, very rapid response. The circular economy and climate change, in my opinion, increasingly come together in a challenge which is, you might call it ecological footprint, you might call it one planet living, but the fundamental challenge that the human race has got to live within the boundaries of the planetary constraints that we have. And the difference between us breaking those constraints and coronavirus is that happens much more slowly. And often the point at which it becomes very recognized that it's very serious, is a high risk of being too late. So the challenge that we've got with the environmental impact of waste and moving to a zero waste economy is that we have to do it before the impact is so severe that we all realize that we need to act. So it really demands leadership, and the only way in which that will ever be solved, and we are starting to really see it now, is when government, consumers and industry all start to realize this is a systemic risk. And the fact that it is feeding now through into the investment community in a very serious way, so that people are starting to go, oh, I have an investment in a coal mine, and that is actually not just a bad thing, it's a risk to my long-term returns. That once that settles in to the baseline of thinking, it will start to drive to a point where you simply just will not be able to make non-recyclable plastic. Just no one will be able to do it. And the key challenge for me in terms of innovation is thinking about how that might go, and therefore what products we'll see. Will plastic rise or will plastic fall? Will aluminium become more or less important? Will paper become more or less important? And the more you think about it, the harder those questions are to answer, and they are the really key challenges of where success or failure will be had in this sector.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, totally. So we've got these different questions, these different things we have to consider. And we've got one man here whose job it is to consider all these things for us. Nick, you've been nodding so vigorously all the time. What is your opinion on that?
So, well, again, I think when it comes to the transition to the circular economy, I think increasingly this is being or combining with the absolutely overriding demand to drive towards a net zero society. And the carbon dioxide equivalent emission reductions that we can get through a better relationship with the raw materials and resources that we rely on day to day in modern life is increasingly going to drive innovation in this area and adoption of technologies in this area. Extracting raw materials is hard work. It's energy intensive, it's carbon intensive, it's water intensive. And more as we develop the technologies that allow us to derive greater amounts of value from these incredibly expensive raw materials, whose actual prices are so far adrift from what you actually pay for them, I think that will be the thing that will increasingly drive the circular economy approaches. And the big, broad brushstroke sweeps to industry, we're watching the wholesale transition of the automotive sector to electric vehicles. And that generates all sorts of challenges, ones for electronic waste. Cars are effectively becoming pieces of electronic waste, no longer car waste. The raw materials that we need to secure and manufacture lithium ion and other battery technologies will have to be a lot more careful how we manage and maintain those resources. And not even dwelling from the point of view of the plastics industry, what that's doing to the basic economics of pulling oil out the ground. As the demand for petroleum as a fuel drops, the availability of that material to make not just plastics, but almost all of our chemical products, we will be seeing wholesale change. And so much of it, the tying up of a circular economy and what that can deliver for us in terms of achieving our net zero ambitions.
Mm-hmm. So just to let me clarify this, you say it's on the one hand, we've got the problem of even more waste and even less resources and even harder to achieve resources on the one hand, but on the other hand, we will have things like petroleum, which will increase the availability of plastic and chemicals and everything coming back to us. That's a really interesting point you're making.
No, it was more the fact that we will have to recycle more because there will be less of those raw materials available. We're already seeing major petrochemical companies starting to recognize the potential issue they have with stranded assets and the cost of extracting these materials from underground. Increasingly, they will simply have to turn to those materials that are already around us. It's the only way we'll be able to satisfy and serve the demand for these materials of a modern and growing consumer society.
Totally. John, maybe I can bounce that over to you, especially in the electronics market. You said it before, we will have increasing amount of electronic devices. Nick talked especially about the whole battery packs coming with cars and all our other electronic devices. Do you think this will be easy to do, or what will it take for us to get into a circular economy in that specific part?
All of my colleagues here have it right. Nick is right on point. There's a growing delta between available, mineable materials in this precious earth that we all live on. So therefore, more urban mining, more keeping this material above ground and responsibly recycling it, no matter what sector, makes total sense as where we have to go. Electronics, let's just use again as the example, because that's what I know. We are zero waste, zero emissions, and zero landfill. So let's break that down. We handle approximately 25 million pounds of electronic waste every month. And all of it stays out of landfills and stays out of the environment. And all of the materials that come out of it, the crushed glass, the steel, the plastics, the aluminum, the copper, the precious metals, all go to beneficial reuse to smelters, either in the United States or around the world. That's the circular economy in reality. To Nick's point, he's exactly spot on. Cars are computers on wheels now. I never had cars as clients 5 years ago. I now have 7 major automakers. And as he said, the next frontier for all of us is this lithium ion battery issue. Whoever breaks the code on lithium battery ions first in terms of responsible recycling and being able to keep them above ground and keep them in a non-dangerous form, which means non-flammable, no explosions, and are able to mine the materials out of them that went into making them, is going to be the big winner here. So that's where we're going. Zero waste, zero landfill, zero emission, responsible recycling in every sector, and stop going into the earth to grab this. One last fact. When you recycle materials responsibly, in every electronic component, we'll use aluminum for this discussion. When you recycle aluminum responsibly above ground and don't go mine it out of new ore, there's a 94% energy savings. So it's not only about keeping the earth cleaner on the ground, in the ecosystem, what we ingest and what comes into plants, animals, and humans, but it's also totally a climate change issue.
Definitely. So to round it up, if I can say it this way, we have on the one hand things happen on the consumer side with growing awareness for climate change, like we've got it with plastic already. And on the other hand, especially on the business side, we will see a growing demand for the resources, which will be a lot less available, and it will be commercially sound, economical sound to get recycled raw materials, because it will be better even for the companies themselves. Thank you for that insight from your hand. Could I get back to you, Mark, whose coronavirus in some ways is just happening with coronavirus as a software company? I think you should have a growing demand on the business side. And what are your thoughts? How will software be able to help us get over that on the business side and on the consumer side, maybe?
Yeah.
Well.
Oh, yeah, it's interesting you ask. It's of course it had a huge impact for our clients, right? And so we work, just to share the picture, we work for about 1,500 waste collection and waste recycling companies across the world, including some of the biggest in the world, like the companies like Waste Management in the US or Republic there, but also the big European players, Suez and so on. And a couple of things. So we reach out to all our customers all the time. How can we help? Because you know what the biggest struggle was? They couldn't operate their business because they were still running all technology in the building, and waste management all of a sudden had to all their workforce. Their drivers couldn't come to the office. So everything that we were preaching for a long time, like, you know, digitalize your business, invest in technology, make sure your drivers can get the driver sheets digitally and they can do their routes from wherever they are. All of a sudden, that kind of, I think that kind of was like a really driving force for adapting new technology, understanding why they have to invest in that. Because my business, we were already used to working from home and working remote. We work from Australia to Canada and throughout Europe. So everyone's already, so we had no damage at all in the business, but these companies had to shift in the, you know, not only their business model, because the waste production was changed all of a sudden, but also their technology shifted. They were carrying out laptops and big computers outside the offices to the people because they didn't have any infrastructure to support working from home, for instance. So that was a big impact. But I'm sure it will drive more, let's say, adoption of more modern technologies and cloud applications and other innovations that are out there.
Definitely. All right, everybody. Our time's already up. Thank you so much for all the insights. If every one of you got a few more minutes, I would love to get the word back to every one of you for a few last words from your end. What would you want to give to all of us, say to all of us to go further on? Maybe who wants to start? Tim, can you say something? What would you say is the most important to you?
I think that the scale of the challenge that we're facing and the speed at which we have to move means that no one individual organization is going to be big enough to solve this on their own. And the need for working collaboratively right across the supply chain and to create the really fully recyclable minimum impact products that we need right from their conception all the way through to the end of their life is really critical. And when we do that, the question that we should always consistently ask ourselves is, how do you see this if you're a consumer, if you're the user? Because what we often spend our time doing is we say, how does it work for my business, or how does it work for this? But most of what we're talking about passes through consumers' hands, and they are the people that we need to facilitate to participate in all of this. And we need to make sure that we make their life easy. And if we get that right and we collaborate, we have a chance of being successful.
Thank you. Yeah, that's so important. And you said it, how's the whole supply chain gonna look like? We could do another session about that right now, I'm sure. But yeah, that's gonna be the really interesting part. Nick, do you want to go on? What are your last words? What's gonna be the most important thing?
I think everyone's got to keep trying hard. You can't just transition to a circular economy overnight. We live in a linear economy that has taken several hundred years, to get to the point where we are. And you can't change that overnight. It's going to be hard. It's going to be tough. A lot of very talented, brilliant companies and individuals are working hard at this, but there's a long way still to go. And I think what Tim said, we've got to keep supporting each other, and we've got to push forward.
Thank you. Yeah, try hard and do the things that are on. Edward, what would you say?
Well,
how can you try harder?
Well, I think the key to all this will be innovation. Innovation really is the new way of solving the current problem. And I think there's going to be an interesting tension. We've already identified that business will be the implementer of the technology that comes out of innovation. Now, if that technology is there and it's available, and the business world as a supply chain doesn't adopt it, we run the risk of government intervention. Now, we're already seeing this in the form of carrot and stick, taxes in some cases, bans in other places. And so it really is up to the business world to come up with the most efficient solution. And I think it's completely possible by cooperation. However, if we don't have that sort of common sense approach to solving the problem, then I think governments will step in and they'll start to put regulations around things, which I don't necessarily think are a good thing, but they may also help accelerate other issues as well. So that'll be the interesting outcome. Let's see how the dice roll and see how quickly we can adopt innovation to solve some of these problems.
Totally right. Thank you. Yeah, got to find the right way and be quick about it. Now John and Mark are getting into the hot spots where some things might have already been said, but I would love to hear what you've got to tell us. Mark, maybe you want to start, and John, you can give us the last words.
Yeah, so part, I think, from what Edward said really relate to that technology element of it, but I'd like to do an appeal to us as consumers. So we talk a lot about technology, but as consumers, we are, I think, also a critical element in this change, right? We got to think to ourselves, and we've done it with some products already, like plastic bags in some countries. Like, it's a shame if you now walk out with a plastic bag. So, and the same thing is like we got to stop buying toothpaste that's in a tube, in a plastic tube, packed in a cardboard, and then wrapped in plastic. We got to stop that stuff. I'm in marketing, so I know I'm responsible big time for all those packaging and all this stuff. My colleagues are, but I think there is also an element of a consumer that we got to change our behavior, and using technology maybe to influence the behavior of consumers effectively as well can definitely also be an important element to make this change.
Yes, definitely. We've got to have a look at this design features, that consumer focused view, like Tim said in the beginning, and get down to that. John, the last words. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Felix. Listen, everybody's already said what needs to be said, so I'm not going to be repetitive. Innovation and collaboration is the only way to do this, to get us forward. The reason why I accept your kind of gracious invitations, Felix, is because there's a whole generation of new entrepreneurs, new Greta Thunbergs and other millennial wonderful young people ready to take the torch from all my esteemed colleagues here and go with, and myself, and take this to the next level. It's our job to inspire them, to support them, to mentor them, and then eventually set them free. Because I believe together we are going to continue to make the world a better place. We are going to continue to make the world a better place.
Thank you for that inspiration. So true. It was an honor to be here with all of you great people, all leaders of your time, big companies, big institutes. Thank you for that. It was a pleasure. It was really a pleasure. It was so fun to have you all here from around the world. I'm sitting in a little village near Munich in Germany and can talk to big CEOs, leaders all over the world, Australia, US, UK, and Netherlands. Thank you for that. And I would love to have you back another time at some point. Thank you to all the attendants for being here, listening to us. And yeah, have a nice evening, morning, afternoon, wherever you are. And to the next time. Bye.
Thank you very much.
Bye, Felix. Thank you.
Thank you.